One morning in its infinite wisdom, Google decided that a good article for me to read would be one titled Pluto's Retrograde Journey is all about taking our power back. That was published by Astrology.com. And I guess it makes sense to some algorithm somewhere that an astronomer should be interested in astrology, though that's not necessarily the case. This article did catch my attention. I was curious, why is Pluto's retrograde journey about taking our power back? So I read it. And I thought it might be fun to make a little video talking about astrology and how Pluto actually influences our lives. And to begin, let's talk about retrograde motion. What does that actually mean? Well, retrograde motion is kind of a trick of geometry. You see, the Earth orbits around the Sun, and so do the other planets in the solar system. And since the Earth is closer to the Sun than planets further out, like say Jupiter, the Earth goes around the Sun quicker than those planets. And then what happens is that as the Earth flies around, it can kind of catch up and pass Jupiter in its orbit. And from our perspective here on Earth, what that manifests as is it looks like Jupiter slows down in its path across the sky, stops, moves backwards momentarily, before the Earth overtakes it in its orbit and Jupiter continues on its normal merry way. Now this brief backtracking is what we call retrograde motion. It's just a trick of geometry of the Earth going faster from a certain perspective. So it's nothing too mystical or magical, unfortunately. And about astrology in general, the general idea of astrology is that the relative position of the Sun, Moon, planets, and apparently Pluto to the background stars influences our day-to-day lives, and with it you can predict how we might be feeling or deal with future events. Fans of astrology like to point out that astronomy wouldn't exist without it, which, even if it were true, it's like saying that my videos today wouldn't exist without the painfully bad videos I started making 7 years ago. It's not a very compelling argument for why we should use or watch something that was shown to be bad long ago, so that one doesn't win me over. But like all good scientists, we should approach problems with open minds and see how the evidence stacks up and see if there are explanations for claims that people make. So let's give astrology a chance and review what fundamental ways the celestial objects could interact with us. We know of 4 fundamental forces in the universe, and right away we can rule out 2 of them, the strong and weak nuclear forces. These forces only act on subatomic distance scales, so there is no chance of something like Pluto sending us gluons or W and Z bosons. So already we're down to 2 forces. We have gravity and electromagnetism, or light. Both of these forces can have an influence on vast distance scales, so maybe they are what influence us from an astrological perspective. Let's first look at gravity. Gravity is created by everything in the universe that has mass, and attracts everything else in the universe that also has mass. We can describe the gravitational pull or acceleration you would feel from an object mathematically with this equation here, where A is the acceleration, which is equal to big G, which is a really small number, that's the gravitational constant. M is the mass of the object tugging you, and R is the distance to that object. Notice how it's R squared, so small changes in the distance lead to big changes in the gravitational acceleration. So like the astrologers do, let's take the extreme case of Pluto and see what acceleration it has on us. Filling in the equation, the mass of Pluto is 1.3 times 10 to the power of 22 kilograms, and the average distance is about 5 trillion meters, and G is about 6.67 times 10 to the power of negative 11 newton meters squared per kilogram squared. This gives us the tiny acceleration of 3.5 times 10 to the power of minus 8 meters per second squared. Absolutely minuscule. To put that into some context, I weigh about 70 kilograms. And if I were within 500 meters of you, I would have a stronger gravitational pull on you than Pluto. But you might agree that Pluto is a stretch, but astrology with the closer objects like the moon is fine. Well, if you were in the rather unfortunate position of having me invade your personal space, standing within a centimeter of you, then my gravitational pull would be equivalent to the moon's. Distance matters a lot with gravity. The closer things are, the stronger effect they have. So if gravity were the force that astrologers predict that the celestial objects influence us by, then they must first take account of pretty much every other object with mass around the individual before including the moon, sun, planets, and Pluto in making their predictions about your day-to-day life. And I think it's fair to say that they don't make those accounts, and gravity isn't the force that they're thinking of. So that leaves us with light. Much like gravity, the brightness of something depends on the inverse distance squared. So again, distance matters a lot. If we do the calculations with the average brightness of Pluto, we find that on Earth we should receive around 3.6 times 10 to the power of minus 29 watts per square meter of light from Pluto. And that is really, really small, especially compared to, say, a 100-watt light bulb. So no matter what way you look at it, this number is incredibly tiny. So again, before astrologers incorporate the electromagnetic influence of Pluto on our lives, they would need to account for pretty much every single light bulb and warm object emitting infrared light before accounting for Pluto, which again, I don't think they do. Of the four fundamental forces, none can provide a reasonable explanation of how Pluto, moving relative to the Earth, could influence our lives. In itself, this isn't really too big of a problem, since there are plenty of things we're still yet to discover and understand about the universe. So if astrologers could make a theory for the special way that chunks of mass can personally affect us, which is testable, then that would be good science. We could test it and see what happens. The trouble is, no such theory has been proposed, and in test after test, the predictive powers of astrology fail. So it doesn't look too good. In the case of Pluto, it's pretty clear that any physical influence it has on us is incredibly weak and insignificant. So with that understanding, let's read the article. In astrological terms, Pluto is one of the most intense and powerful planets circling the cosmos. Alright, they've taken a very different interpretation of physics than what we have. Okay, well then let's keep reading. With themes focusing on our deepest selves, psychology, transformation, and the subconscious, this archetype can feel intimidating to some. While Pluto's energy isn't the most comfortable, it definitely is necessary, especially when it comes to making changes and evolving. So Pluto plays a massive role in astrology apparently, which is curious given it was discovered so recently. How did ancient astrologers account for all of these things? Were all of their predictions completely wrong before the discovery of Pluto by modern astronomers with powerful telescopes? I don't know. That's a question for the astrologers to answer. Anyway, let's keep reading. Since this retrograde is occurring in Capricorn, we'll be dealing with matters involving karma, structure, and stability, both on personal and collective levels. You may also find that you are more career and status oriented right now and will likely feel eager to get rid of any obstacles that are preventing you from thriving professionally. While what a bold and unique claim, we don't want things standing in the way of our success. Well, what will the astrologers come up with next? Well, let's keep reading. During Pluto's retrograde journey of 2021, you'll gain clarity on things that are no longer working for you, so you can release them and move forward as an improved version of yourself. You must do the work necessary to transform during this time, or you could end up stuck in a rut. Well, that's generally good advice and also sufficiently vague. It's always good to keep trying to improve yourself, I won't disagree with that. But again, I'm not too sure why Pluto, apparently moving backward from our perspective, makes all of these things more necessary. Now this is where it gets more interesting, I guess. What zodiac signs are most affected by Pluto's retrograde motion? Some signs will have an easier time with this retrograde than others. While both Scorpio and Capricorn will feel this energy very closely, the vibrations from it are ones they're used to working with. this can be to their benefit. As a mutable sign, Pisces shouldn't have much of a problem going along with this transformative ride. So I guess they suggest here that Pluto is sending out waves that interact with us. So maybe some advanced astrologers could suggest a quantum field theory approach to astrology where each planet or celestial object has its own field which permeates the universe, and the planets are just manifestations of that field. Maybe that's a good theory to start with. I'm not sure. Anyway, Virgo is always up for a challenge, especially if it means things can be improved or fixed. Very good, Virgo. In terms of signs that will face the most challenge, Gemini and Leo will likely be the most thrown off balance, while Aries and Taurus could feel tested as well. Cancer, Libra, Sagittarius and Aquarius will want to take things in stride, as the retrograde could become quite intense for these members of the zodiac. Okay, so that's a lot of, I guess, generalized statements about how people react to things. But from this point on in the article, they then go on to make some horoscopes, as astrologers like to do. So based off this general summary of the way Pluto is affecting us, I thought it might be interesting to do a little test. I'm going to read out one of the horoscopes, I won't tell you which, and you can try and make an educated guess based on what I've just read out of how Pluto will influence the different star signs, and see if you can guess correctly. So leave your guess in the comments and we'll see if it's kind of accurate. If the description they gave there is relatively accurate, then you should expect that people will get to the same conclusion. That's generally what happens with science, at least. If you describe some aspect of nature, people can use that to work towards understanding that aspect of nature. So anyway, let's do our very own not-so-scientific test of the validity of astrology. Your sign is known for being a bit of a radical, with visions on how humanity can band together for change. During this retrograde, you may become even more aware of how society needs to evolve. Pluto's energy will hit you deep in the feels, which could weigh you down if you are not careful. When you're feeling blue about the world, do something to take action toward causes you feel passionate about. By placing energy in the change you want to see, you'll feel better about your place in this world. So I guess the sentiment for this horoscope is generally pretty nice. Try and change the world positively. I can't disagree with that. But anyway, what's your guess as to which star sign this applies to? Let me know in the comments, and let me know how you think Pluto is going to influence your life over the next few months. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.